Hey there, TED09 students. This is Dr. Pais here for our second lecture for the Grammar Pedagogy course. And today we're going to be talking about what role, if any, generative AI and constructive AI might have when it comes to lesson planning and preparing for classroom practice. So what I'd like to do first is talk about some general best practices when it comes to something called prompt engineering. So prompt engineering just refers to how we prompt an AI system like ChatGPT or Twee or Rose AI to produce meaningful and useful output. Said another way, it's the decisions that we make in presenting a problem or a situation to the AI that will help it to produce the most useful output possible, right? So basically, there are right ways and wrong ways to ask questions, ways that will produce more meaningful end results and ones that will produce things that aren't as useful. So when it comes to prompt engineering for lesson planning, there's a couple of things that I want you to keep in mind, right? The first thing that I want you to remember is that the AI is a tool and not a replacement for your expertise as an educator, right? The reason why I say this is you should always be passing AI output through the filter of your professional perception, right? So just because an AI tool says that, I don't know, using a particular song is good for teaching grammar doesn't automatically make it the case. You still need your expertise and your experience in the classroom and with your learners to contextualize that response and to make the final decision of whether or not that recommendation is indeed a legitimate one for your situation, right? So the AI tool doesn't replace you. Instead, it supplements you and your abilities, right? Everything that I'm going to show you today, you could most certainly do on your own quite easily with enough time, right? And as you get more proficient at lesson planning, increasingly more easily, right? But the AI tool is there to supplement you and your abilities so that you're not spending as much time in things like lesson planning or certain administrative tasks, and are instead able to dedicate more time to your learners and to individualized instruction, and also having a little bit of a personal life because teaching can be very time intensive, right? The other thing that I want you to keep in mind when it comes to prompt engineering is that context is vital. If we wanted to use a metaphor, we might say that context is king. The more contextual information that you can provide in your prompts, the more meaningful and useful that output is going to be. And part of the reason for this is because current AI models like GPT-4 are quite good at attempting to adhere to those Gricean maxims that their responses should be relevant. Now, whether or not they're truthful is another thing, and that's why we still need your expertise, right? So because of this, the more context we can provide the AI about the kind of class we're preparing, the topic, the learners, maybe even a little bit about what we covered in the previous lesson, the more likely it is to produce something useful for us in our current work. Beyond this idea that context is vital is also the idea that we should view our interactions with the AI agents or the AI tools as a dialogue, right? So we don't just give it a prompt and then take the output and say, yay, that's the end of the day. Instead, we take time to engage with the output that the AI has produced and suggest extensions or revisions, or we ask it additional questions to try and drive that conversation in down a certain path, right? So one of the ways that I think about AI tools when I use them in my own practice as either an educator or as an emerging programmer right, is it's me having a conversation with a peer, right? It's a way for me to bounce ideas off of someone else, even when I don't have access to them. Because the other thing about teaching, especially English language teaching, is that it can sometimes feel like a very insular task. Our fellow teachers are often just as busy as we are, so we don't get the benefit of being able to just share ideas and talk about practice the way that we do in grad school or in a training program like here at Montgomery College. So the AI can fill that role of kind of a sounding board, right? So if we think of it this way and we think of our interactions with it as a conversation, this can help us arrive at more useful output from the AI agent, right? Another thing to think about as we're thinking about how we actually go about structuring these prompts is the kind of information we're going to include in our initial prompt, right? The very first thing that we say to the AI. And here there are a lot of different models. One of the more popular models for prompt engineering is the role, task, requirements, and instructions model, right? Where what we do is instead of just giving it a one-line command, we instead give it a solid paragraph or so worth of information about the task that we're working with, right? We first begin by giving the AI agent a role, saying something like, imagine you are uh, teaching an English for academic purposes class for college students, and this week you have to talk about subject-verb agreement, for example, which is the example we're going to use here in just a moment, right? Now, imagine that your students are high intermediate to advanced proficiency level, and you need to generate a 50-minute engaging lecture on subject-verb agreement that has a lot of interactive components to really help students learn, right? So here we've given it a role, the task that we have for it. It needs to develop this lesson and some requirements of it. It needs to be interactive, for example, right? And it needs to be for the specific population. We can then also give it additional instructions like to output an outline or some notes or something like that, right? Now, this is relatively simple. There's nothing particularly groundbreaking in any of these principles, but it's very easy to look at automated systems and say, hey, I'm just going to tell you exactly what I need and you're going to give it to me because that's how we use Google. But working with AI tools isn't quite the same as using Google. So instead of just talking about this, let's look at it. So I have 3 AI agents that we are going to use, and I'm going to go ahead and pop up our first one for us, right? So we are going to get started in this imaginary lesson planning, excuse me, by working with ChatGPT, okay? And I'm going to use ChatGPT 3.5 because that's the freely available version for everyone. I use GPT-4 in my own lesson planning and practice because I find it a valuable enough tool that I'm willing to pay the premium. But if you're just getting started using AI tools, don't pay for anything yet until you feel the value proposition for that is appropriate. Right, so I'm going to start with this initial prompt of just giving the AI tool some context, and let's see where it takes us, shall we? So I'm going to start by saying, imagine that you're teaching an ESL writing class for, let's say, upper intermediate college students who need to master academic writing before they can take their required college composition course. Last week, we focused on sentence structure and the importance of using a lot of variety in our sentence structure across longer paragraphs. Today, the class is focused on better understanding subject-verb agreement. I'd like you to come up with a 50-minute lesson plan for this group. Provide the lesson plan to me as a bulleted list with time indices. Right, and we're going to say that you're a new ESL teacher, teaching an ESL writing class for upper intermediate college students for the first time. Right, and let's see what it produces. Right, so straight away we get our output. Right, it's the 3.5 model, so it tends to spit things out a little bit quickly, but let's go ahead and look here. So we have our titles, subject, verb, agreement, lesson plan, duration 50 minutes. So we have our introduction, 5 minutes, greet the students and briefly review the lesson on sentence structure and variety. So here we have some scaffolding, some transfer by connecting it to the previous learning. 5 minutes might feel a little bit tight with some of the other things that have to happen during the class, the first couple minutes of class. But starting with this sort of reflective or review moment can be very powerful for learners in helping to solidify previous learning and also connecting previous learning to the topic or the content for that day. Explain that today's lesson will focus on subject-verb agreement. Great. And then it has a conceptual explanation, define subject-verb agreement and its significance in clear communication. Present examples of correct and incorrect. Okay, yeah, so this is going for a pretty explicit sort of approach to teaching subject-verb agreement, which that's fine. We often use explicit approaches when we're first introducing a topic. Right, and then we have the rules, and it's summarized the rules for us here, provide some examples, and then for the practice activity, distribute worksheets or handouts with exercises on subject and verb agreements, instruct students to individually complete the exercises, okay? Group discussion, 5 minutes, that's a little bit tight, so we might actually get rid of that. Yeah, probably get rid of that. Or make it part of the practice activity up there and just make it 20 minutes. Application and writing. 10 minutes can be a little bit short for upper intermediate students to do in-class writing, especially if you want them to focus on something particular and to produce a longer piece of writing. Now, if you just want them to produce a paragraph, 10 minutes might be sufficient. My initial feeling looking at this, 7 points in a 50-minute class period, it's going to feel really tight because you never know how long it's going to take students for the practice activity. So I might give the AI this feedback and say, I like the general idea behind this lesson of introducing the concept and providing some rules about subject-verb agreement. And I really like the use of examples. However, there's a lot going on for a 50-minute class, and I think you'll run out of time. Let's revise this lesson plan to have more teacher-student interaction, to encourage the students to use the examples as a learning tool, and then only have one application/practice activity. And let's see what it produces. All right, so it's revised it here. We have the introduction, we have the conceptual explanation again, that's good. Some rules and examples, so we're at 30, 40 minutes, 10 minutes for guided practice. All right, so it's 35 minutes, 45 minutes for guided practice. Okay. Yeah, I think we're still a little bit, I think we might be over on time, right? Because that's 5, 20, 35, 45. Yeah, so we're over on time here. So what I would do here then is I would probably tell it to combine points 6 and 7 and to get rid of point 5. 5 and combine 6, 7. Right. Good. And now I might tweak, excuse me. Now I might tweak this a little bit because it's still trying to cram that application in writing. Right now I might tweak it a little bit, but it should be largely ready for me to export into Word or however I like to organize my lesson plans, right? But there's really this question of, well, what should I do with these examples, right? I could certainly turn to the textbook if we have one, but many college ESL programs, for example, don't use textbooks, relying on the teacher instead to curate the materials for the students. So I could easily come up with the examples, but I'm kind of busy. I have a bunch of grading to do. So let's see what it can come up with for examples. What are some useful examples to show upper intermediate ESL students? Just in case I forgot, I'm going to include this contextual information again to help them or to help introduce the idea. Introduce the idea of subject-verb agreement. Right? Give me, say, 10 with explanations for why they work. Right? And let's see what it comes up with. The dog barks loudly. That seems to be a favorite of this. I think I've seen it output the dog barks loudly a couple of times, which if you know anything about how large language models work, that's a little bit surprising, I suppose. The students study diligently, right? And then we have those explanations there too. So that also helps me as an educator because there might be some strange ones. For example, the committee meets every Wednesday. Collective nouns like this can be really tricky for ESL students, and they can be really tricky for native speakers too. Because the actual rule behind collective nouns like this is if the collective noun or if the sentence is referring to the collective noun as a single unit, then we use singular verbs. But if we're referring to individual parts of that collective noun, then we use plural verbs. So because I know this and because I know my learners upper intermediate, I actually might ask for a couple more examples about collective nouns, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say, my students often struggle with subject-verb agreement and the use of collective nouns. Can you create a handout for these students that provides a general set of rules for when to use a singular verb or a plural verb with a collective noun? And can you give, let's say, 5 examples with explanations that would be easy for these students to understand? Right? Here we go. See, so now it's doing what I would be hoping for, right? So we have the use of collective nouns, the rule, right? A singular verb is used when referring to the group as a whole, while the plural verb is used when emphasizing the individual members of the group. That's good. I might refine the wording a little bit to be more accessible for upper intermediate students, or I might just leave it because it's good authentic language. It's a decision I have to make based on the group that I'm working with. But we see here the team is practicing versus the team are discussing their strategies, and it explains here. So that's really good. That's really helpful, right? Deliberates, it's a good academic verb there. We can actually use it as a chance to help students acquire more academic vocabulary. So that's really good. So we have our, our explanation and our examples, or our rule and our examples, and then it's sort of retranslated this into a set of rules, and it's even created some practice exercises. So that's actually really helpful because I didn't ask for the practice exercises. But for a handout like this, that would be great. And the students can do those 5 as like a bonus activity if they wanted to. I don't even need to take that for a grade. And it's already given me the answer key, right? The note, of course, if you're a teacher, always have more examples lined up. And I might get rid of that part, but yeah, I could easily turn this into a handout now, copy and paste it into Word, give it to my students. This is a good start. This is exciting. But the other thing that I really need, because again, I'm a busy teacher. I've got a bunch of papers to grade. I don't really have time for lesson planning. What I really need are some ideas for that guided practice and application activity. So our lesson plan has about 10 to 15 minutes for a guided practice and application activity. What ideas do you have for a fun, interactive way to do this with these students? And let's see what it comes up with. A subject verb scavenger hunt. Yeah, that could be fun. Gives some benefits of the activity. That's just one though. I need more. That's fine. But give me 3 more ideas. Right, I'm just going to pick the best one, I think, or the one that I like the most. Sentence relay race. Okay, well, my classroom's pretty small. I don't think I could do that. Quiz show we did before. Gallery walk could be fun. Prepare a set of posters and charts displaying the sentences related to subject and verb agreement with collective nouns. Some sentences should have errors while others should be correct. Hang the posters around the room, spaced apart. Yeah, the gallery walk could be fun. So I need 2 things for this. I need the instructions to give the students, and I need the example sentences to put on the posters. Right? I really like the idea of the gallery walk. And I'll be honest with you, I've never heard of a gallery walk before today. I think this might be a more K-12 style activity, but it's a good one. Can you write a simple, let's say, half-page set of instructions that I can give to my learners at the beginning of this activity, at the beginning of this activity? Great. Oh, look at that. It even uses inviting language. So welcome to the subject-verb agreement gallery walk. In this activity, you will have the opportunity to explore and discuss sentences related to subject-verb agreement. Divide into small groups, start at your assigned poster, rotate to the next poster, review as a class. This looks pretty cool, right? Now, I could also use a different generative AI agent like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion to create some images to go with this, but we'll just stick with text for right now. Let's say that I want to make, I know I said it was a small class, but let's say that I want to make 10 posters. Can you give me 10 sentences that I can put on these posters? And let's have 4 of them have some subject verb agreement error in them, right? And let's see what it produces. Oh, look, it's even doing the collective verbs. It's doing a couple. Actually, those are all collective verbs, right? Collective nouns, I'm sorry. Which isn't bad. But I don't want them to all have collective nouns. I want some to be other noun classes. So this is great, but let's only use collective nouns for 3 of them. And it's being pretty stuck on the idea that they should all have collective nouns. No. I don't want all of the sentences to use collective nouns. The activity should give students exposure to a wide range of subject-verb agreement issues. The team is practicing for their routines in the comp. Okay, this is a lot better. Yeah, this I like a little bit more. Okay, good. Good, good, good. And it even gives the explanation there, so I can take these sentences, I can put them on the posters or draw them on the whiteboard, something like that. So this is good. So now I have my loose lesson plan. I have instructions for my students. I have a worksheet that I can hand out to them, right? Now, one of the things that we know is in teaching, there are often a lot of unknowns. So I can ask my AI friend here something like, what are some tricky subject-verb agreement questions that my students might ask that I should be prepared for? What kinds of questions do they often ask that can trip up less prepared educators? Let's see what it says. ESL students often ask tricky subject-verb agreement questions and can sometimes trip up less prepared educators. Thank you for plagiarizing me, but whatever. Here are some common ones to be aware of. The problem with indefinite pronouns. Yes, we actually read about that in our textbook. Compound subjects. Good, good. And it's giving me some examples here. So I can have this list printed off next to my lesson plans and have it as something to refer to in case students ask me something that I'm unprepared for. So that's good. Right. So I have my lesson plan now. I have a handout for the students that I can give specifically for collective nouns and subject-verb agreement. I have my activity and the instructions I can give my students for the activity. And I have the sample sentences that I can put up, right? Again, all of these are things that I, as the educator, could have created based on my own experiences teaching and on the materials provided, right? But by working with the AI agent, I've been able to create something a little bit more responsive to my group, right? I could also have easily have directed the AI agent another way by saying, hey, you know what? My students seem to really understand collective nouns, so can we focus on some of the word order issues that come up in subject-verb agreement for these students, right? So I could use the AI agent to really kind of individualize the learning for my students, right? And I'll give you an example of that right now. I might say I have a student who really struggles with subject-verb agreement when there are uncountable nouns. What is some advice that you would give this student to help them master this concept? Right. There we go. To help the student struggling with subject-verb agreement with uncountable nouns, here are some pieces of advice to offer. Understand the concept of uncountable nouns. Recognize that uncountable nouns are singular. Okay. Practice with sentence construction. Okay. So there's some good things here. It's a bit much. If I gave my student this much feedback, it'd be a little bit overwhelming, but I really like the first three, right? So numbers 1 through 3 are really good. Can you turn those into an email to the student? They asked for some extra feedback yesterday, and I promised to email them back some ideas. All right, dear student, I hope this email finds you well. As promised, I wanted to provide you with some additional tips and ideas to help you master subject-verb agreement with uncountable nouns. And then we have those 3 bullet points recreated here. Nice personal tone. Great, wonderful. Again, I could write the email on my own, no problem, and I would indeed probably produce something quite similar to this, right? But now I have a starting point here. I can copy and paste this and start tailoring it more to meet the needs of that learner. Now, one thing that we know is that many language teachers, especially as ESL teachers, love to give our students YouTube videos, but ChatGPT can only work with text, and it refuses to watch videos, which is honestly probably for the best considering how AI learns. For that, however, I can use a tool like Twee. So I'm going to give it this subject-verb agreement video. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab the URL. And let's see, what do I want it to do? Do I want to create questions or a summary? Let's see. You know what? I'm going to give this video to my students to watch out of class, and then we can start with a very low stakes, ungraded little mini quiz to help them. So I'm going to have it create multiple choice questions. So I'm just going to click there, create ABCD questions for a text. No, that one's text-based. We got a YouTube video. So we're going to do this in 2 steps then. Let's do, let's do video to text. Give it our URL. And it's going to go ahead and watch about 5 minutes of the video, which should be fine. Right? And we'll just move the slider over a little bit because the first few seconds are just them talking about their channel and how awesome they are. Right? And so now it's watching the video very quickly, and it's going to produce a text of that video. And then I can use that text to do the other thing. Right? So now we just wait here awkwardly while it watches the video, which if it's watching it 5 times fast, it should only take about a minute or so. There we go. So we can go ahead and take this text right here. Oh, look. Instead of that, I'm going to go down here. I was just going to copy and paste it and go to the other thing. They've actually got some useful things in here. So let's do the lead-in activity, because like I said, we were going to have the students watch the video, and I thought maybe we should do a quiz, but maybe there's some other lead-in activity that could be fun that we could use, right? So it's going to go ahead and create 3 lead-in activities that we can use. So a matching game, a sentence scramble, and a discussion prompt. So maybe we'll have students do the sentence scramble. And here, instead of turning to twee, so I don't think they have. Yeah, doesn't look like they have the sentence scramble. So we're going to turn back to ChatGPT and say, can you create an activity or create the materials for the activity outlined in this prompt? And we're just going to go ahead and give it the prompt from twee. So we're going to feed something from one AI into another. And there we go. So we have our whiteboard on our chalkboard, an outline for how we can do it. But it hasn't given me the important thing. I want the actual sentences. Can you give me the sentences? Well, not give me, that sounds too demanding. Can you help me come up with the scrambled sentences to use for this activity? All right, and let's see what it produces. Great, there we go. All right. Boy, the dance, the cat's sleep. My sister cooked dinner. Awesome. So we've got some stuff here that we can use. I don't know that those are necessarily scrambled. The boy dances. Try again. Make sentences that both focus on subject-verb agreement and are scrambled in word order. There we go. That's a little bit better. Okay, good. So I can use those. The other thing that I can then do with twee that can be really helpful is that I can use it to create a summary or some discussion questions for my students, right? The summary can be helpful because it can help students remember what they actually watched in the video, right? And you can actually then use those as part of a larger in-class activity But we're going to go ahead and have it create some questions for us for the video. Helps if you give it the video and not the prompt, right? There we go. And we'll have it create some ABCD questions. Right, there we go. So what is this video about? What does subject-verb agreement mean? What does a singular noun mean? What is a singular verb? Okay, yeah, this is pretty good, right? And I could use this for, I wouldn't use this for like an assessment, but I could use it as a starting point one day, right? So they come in and they take this and then we can discuss it as a group, right? So the nice thing about TWE here is that it allows us to also incorporate YouTube videos as a starting point and as part of the generation activity. We can, of course, do things wholly text-based, right? We don't necessarily have to have the YouTube video. But I find ChatGPT is a really useful tool for that. And as you saw here, we can actually create a conversation between our AI agents to come to new understandings, right? Or to new potential output. Another thing that we have to do eventually is we have to actually prepare our presentation. So here I'm going to turn to Gamma app and I'm going to go new with AI and I'm going to click on guided, right? And we're going to do a presentation. So I'm just going to go ahead and say what I told ChatGPT, which is I'm teaching a class of upper intermediate ESL students about subject-verb agreement. Can you help me create an engaging and interactive presentation that introduces the rules of subject-verb agreement and provides some practice for the students. Right. Great. So it's given us this outline: introduction to subject-verb agreement, explanation of the rules, examples, common mistakes to avoid, interactive practice, group discussion to reinforce. Yeah, no, I kind of like that. And this largely matches the outline that we had from ChatGPT. We could also copy and paste the outline from ChatGPT into this one. So I'm just going to go ahead and click continue. Nothing nearly so edgy. We'll pick a breathier sort of template. Click get started. And now we will again just awkwardly wait a moment or two while the AI does its job. Right. There we go. We have our deck and it's tossing stuff in there: mastering subject and verb agreements, a guide for upper intermediate ESL students. That title is a mouthful, so I'll certainly change that. I'll actually just get rid of the subtitle. Right. Good, good, good. So what is subject verb agreement? The dogs are barking, the cat is sleeping. Cool. Now, what's interesting is it doesn't give an example of how verb tense necessarily needs to agree with subject, but we do kind of see that in the picture, I think, but I would still probably reproduce it down here in text to help the students. Right, some rules of subject verb agreement. So these here aren't necessarily rules. This is more like steps that you take, right? Yeah, so I might change the heading there, change some of the examples. This one's pretty good though. Yeah. I mean, not too bad. I feel like this is a bit more appropriate to low intermediate or beginner. This one's good though. It brings us back to that conversation of collective nouns, right? But again, the benefit here isn't the fact that it's created something for me that I just use out of the box. Instead, what I have now is structure and a starting point. And now as the expert, I can go in and tailor this to my students' needs. I also don't have to go hunting down generic images. It's already found those or created those for me from its large repository, right? But again, what I've done is I haven't removed myself as the expert in the equation. Instead, I've supplemented my own abilities to streamline that process. And now I have more time to focus on working with my learners, providing additional support during office hours or via email, right? Or quite novelly for somebody in education, potentially having some time to attend to myself and some of my own needs so that I can be more present and available for my students, right? And this, I believe, especially if we look at the more contingent nature of uh, a lot of work in the field of English language teaching, is the real potential of generative AI, which are the three tools that I showed you today, right? We can use them to supplement the skills and ability of the professional educator so that even if they exist in this contingent space, they still have room to engage with students, right? To focus on the needs of their learners instead of focusing on uh, some of the sort of rote tasks that we repeatedly have to see to, right? Or we can streamline the lesson planning process. We can make it more dialogic and conversational, right? Get a form of peer feedback from the AI agent to help refine those plans, right? Without having to wait for an opportunity to talk with a colleague, which may never come because you're both busy, right? Or instead of writing example sentences on a Saturday night, you've now got your examples in 10, 15 minutes. And now you can move on to actually enjoying your Saturday night so that Monday morning, when you hit the classroom again, you're energized, you're relaxed, and you're ready to go. And you can be the best possible educator you can be. Because at the end of the day, just like your students are people and we encourage you to consider their needs and their realities, you as the educator are also a human, right? And you bring those things to the classroom with you for better or for worse. All right, that's it for today. You have a great one, and I'll see you in class next Saturday.